Walking into the PTR for Season 8 of Diablo 4, a lot of people were wondering just how much harder the game was going to get, because the developers made it quite clear that there was going to be increased scaling, it was going to be harder to get in a World Tier 4, they actually wanted to re-add progression to the game, basically making progression great again. So what you're currently looking at is my Necromancer from Season 7, with my fully kitted out level 100 glyphs, 12 out of 12 masterwork gear, all the mythics you can want, etc., etc., currently running 2 different pits in that PTR. On the left, you're looking at a tier 80 pit, and you'll notice that I'm basically breezing right through. Most of the monster packs, I just have to round them up, and then I just cut them down. It turns out that with the changes to the Ahu and the Zan rune, they were just as powerful as I expected them to be, which I'll definitely be covering in a future video, because I think the general implications of this is much larger than I can contain in a single video. So just a difference of 10 pit tiers, I go from being able to absolutely crush this to quite literally not being able to kill a single pack in the same amount of time that I've been yapping your ear off. So basically what I'm trying to say is this game got a lot harder, a lot more challenging. Builds are going to have to excel and be able to tap into every single damage source that is possibly at their disposal for you to get anywhere near clearing out a tier 100 pit, let alone getting anything above that. Quite frankly, take the idea of clearing pit 150, throw that in the garbage. I don't think a build's ever going to do it again. You know, unless there's some absolutely ridiculous bugged interaction where we're getting quintillions or you know, negative damage values. Look, I can't tell the future, but realistically, builds really shouldn't be aspiring for that, and that's not a bad thing. But let's go ahead and just very quickly give you a few more benchmarks to understand what the relative power of the build that you're looking at is, so that you can have a much more concrete understanding of where your build was and probably where it'll end up walking into Season 8. So in the PTR, you're able to copy over your characters from the previous seasons. This was my Necromancer. 12 out of 12 masterwork across every single piece of gear. Is it a perfect character? Absolutely not. Is it a damn good character? Yes. And with the gear that I had, the power that I had, and my level 100 glyphs, etc., I was able to previously clear pit tier 118 with the ability to clear 120 with a perfect fish, but probably not higher than that. Now, Griffon TV on the same build was able to clear out pit tier 121. So I just want to throw some quick numbers at you very quickly and just show you the math of it to give you a better understanding of where this build was before and why it's kind of hilarious that it's now struggling to do something with only 2 digits in its tier level. So using the handy dandy Necromancer damage calculator that you might have seen in a previous video, but I kind of hope you didn't, because I've made this thing significantly better in every single way. I'm actually going to make a new video where I'm going to show you the rollout of it and how to use it, because I think that this tool is probably going to revolutionize most people's ability to theorycraft at home. But calculating the relative buff that I was getting from the seasonal powers of last season, because you have to remember we had 3 of the occult gems and a ton of witch powers adding on a huge amount of damage multiplication. All said and told, I was getting somewhere around 117% bonus damage. So that's a 2.17 times damage multi. And if you were to just run the math very quickly on what you should expect from what I was able to clear versus what I would clear without them, it's basically about -6 pit tiers there. So my build was able to do, without these powers, a pit tier 112. Right? So I'm going from doing a pit tier 112 without the seasonal powers down to breezing through a pit tier 80 and getting hard stopped at pit tier 90. It's -22 pit tiers on a pretty close to perfect character. Now, I'm also going to make a mega cut of all of the new bosses, showing off all of their new mechanics and what you should expect to be able to clear out. But again, this is a character that already has all the uniques that it wants, is 12 out of 12 masterwork, already has all the mythics that it wants, and basically has no more progression to go other than perfect masterworking. And as you can see, damage output against the bosses, when I can actually manage to hit them, is pretty decent. But the overlapping mechanics and just how much survivability, movement speed, and game knowledge you're going to have to be able to fight these guys should not be underestimated. While the low tier bosses like Varshan, Grigor, Lord Zir, and even the new Urivar, although his fight is very, very cool, are generally pushovers. They were very easy to fight. On World Tier 4, the moment that you bump up to Indariel and Duriel, you start to notice, hey, this game kind of took the boxing gloves off, and your build is going to have to be super strong to be able to realistically farm these guys at this difficulty. Ha! Oh my god. Oh, not to mention the brand new boss too, the Harbinger of Hatred, you know, Wolfie Mephisto. Very, very cool fight, actually has mechanics. It's probably my favorite of all of the ones that they've added thus far, because at the time of me recording this video, we haven't been able to fight Giga Belial. But all of this is to basically say, you really should not be expecting to, in a day or two, getting all the way up to World Tier 4 and then just being able to churn through farming all of these bosses for the gear that you need. You're going to progress through World Tiers, and I would be surprised if after the first week, anywhere near 50% of the player base was even past World Tier 3. That's how starkly different this difficulty spike is. And while there are some bugs out there, and I definitely think Andariel is way too overtuned, she has like 18 different one-shot mechanics and they all just kind of happen at the same time. But that's, I guess, a complaint for another video entirely. You might be asking yourself, Mac, what do you think about all these difficulty changes? Is this good for the game? Is this going to be great? Is it going to completely destroy non-meta builds? And will casuals even be able to play? Well, first and foremost, obviously, day one of the PTR, a lot of these things are going to get tuned. So our opinion of it, as well as the introduction of the various boss powers, are going to lay a completely different lens by which we can analyze these types of things from. But I think that we can still have a pretty valuable conversation about the concept of progression, challenge, reward, and chase as it pertains to ARPGs in general, but most notably how Diablo 4 has kind of evolved since the game came out. I guess we could do a quick history lesson here, but at first, this game had one thing that you did, it was Nightmare Dungeons, and the one thing you didn't do was ever clear a tier 100. There was only a very small handful of builds that could even survive long enough, and most of them had to be literally immune 99.9% of the time to be able to do that. Rest in peace to Infinimist, I guess you served a purpose at one point. But the issue with this is that it was completely inaccessible to the majority of players, and there was no real way to progress to that point, and it was ultimately not very rewarding. Fast forward through trying out things like the Abattoir of Zir, which is inevitably where we get something like the Pit from, and where we're at in the modern day Diablo 4. While you can personally enjoy just blasting through it, while you can personally enjoy the, let's go ahead and face it, the near next to zero level of challenge, and thus any feeling of accomplishment, or at least for myself personally, I guess I can't speak for everybody, but it has been a long time since the game offered a challenge that I felt like after overcoming, I would even really be proud enough to be able to say it out loud. While being able to clear a high pit tier is something cool, it's ultimately something that is measured by your gear progression as opposed to your skill progression. Will the best players in the world do it faster and do it better? Yes, of course. But were even just the majority of casuals eventually doing a pit tier 150 on Bloodwave last season? Also, yes. So it really begs the question, if we're not going to have leaderboards, is there anything that the game can do to give you a reason to grind, a reason to progress, a reason to keep playing past the first week? And I think these changes to the progression through the pit tiers and world tier, as well as the inevitable hell yeah moment of being able to post that screenshot of you killing the Giga Belial for the first time on your homebrewed character, I think it's really going to mean a lot to people who have been hoping that Diablo 4 could deliver something not just for the casuals, but for the people who do at least attribute a bit of the value of the game of being able to say, hey, I did something cool that other people can recognize and give me a hell yeah brother right back. So yes, I do think that these changes are ultimately good and healthy for the game. In fact, if you watched my last feedback video for the developers, one of the large things that I went into is that the majority of players kind of get lost walking into World Tier 4, especially if they're playing on a powerful build, because they haven't had any time to really sit and learn the build. They don't really know why the gear matters. They don't know why the combination of skills that they've read in a build guide go together. So they just end up in World Tier 4, don't really know what to do, and then ultimately start suffering from the fact that their gear hasn't progressed well enough, or their game knowledge hasn't progressed well enough to actually be able to do meaningful things on the build. And they're kind of left in this weird little oasis of, I should be strong, but I'm not. I think that a longer progression tail throughout the difficulties, where there's nothing that says you have to be in World Tier 4, but if you can get there, you are rewarded for doing so, has to be an option in this game. There has to be reasons for people to get good at it, instances to learn, and instigators for gaining game knowledge, as well as actually giving us a reason to grind. Now, there is one glaring issue, generally with everything that I've said here, and it comes down to the idea of finishing a character, or at least what individuals would consider finishing it. And there are a few different ways that you could look at this, but there appears to be one unifying theory about what it means to finish your character. And that is leveling up your glyphs that you want to use for your build up to level 100. In the current system, I think the vast majority of people playing builds that are not the meta build for your class for that season are going to struggle to even complete a pit tier 100. Something that, if you want to level up your glyphs to level 100, you have to be able to do. Now, you could get carried, but that doesn't really give people a sense of accomplishment. But as it stands right now, without reworking how glyph leveling will happen in the future, casuals will just never be able to do this. Hell, people who are deep into theorycraft of this game won't be able to do it unless they're playing a strong enough build. And I do think that that's lame. I think that that sucks out loud. I think that at least this one deterministic part of the game, where if you are willing to put in the time, you will get to something where literally you can't click upgrade anymore. The idea of finishing your character is something that everybody should be able to strive for. Maybe not everybody gets up to Paragon 300. I sure as hell have never done it. I don't have the patience for it. Maybe everybody doesn't get perfect 3 and 4 G8 gear. That's also something I've never really done, except for that one time that Crip handed me a perfect Evan Piercer. Shoutouts to my boy Crip, I appreciate you. But this, at the very least, is something that everybody generally gets behind and says like, yes, I want to be able to accomplish that. And I think that it's valid. So my only request to the developers is that ultimately the system of leveling up your glyphs should always have a chance to be able to upgrade them, however small that might be, regardless of the pit tier that you're clearing. Even if it goes somewhere down to like a 5% chance, if you're trying to get them up to level 100, but you're only able to clear like an 85 or maybe a 90 pit tier, you should still be able to do it. So I do hope that they come back to the table with some way of changing this system so that people can at least say like, yes, I finished my season. I did my season's journey. I got whatever the cosmetics were. I killed, pinnacle bosses. I killed Belial one time. I got the gear I wanted, tried my build, got my glyphs up. I can be done with this season. I think that that's fair. There you go. I just wanted to share my experience with this. I know that there's a lot of question marks about ultimately how everything will shake out. I don't think that the pit scaling is really an issue. I do like that it's a challenge to get into World Tier 4. I think that the bosses legitimately being hard fights again is actually something that's very cool. If you played the PTR, I'd love to hear from you down in the comments. Even if you haven't played the PTR, I would still love to hear from you. What are your expectations? What have you seen from your favorite content creators? The coverage that you've seen of it? Are you enjoying it? Do you think that there's something that could be done better? Now is the time to make your voices heard, because during the PTR is when we can get all the feedback into the hands of the developers and they can walk away going, okay, this is what we tried. What should we do? This is definitely a pivotal moment. So let me know down in the comments the best ideas will percolate up, and maybe I can get them shared out to the developers. If you're brand new here, subscribe to the channel. You don't want to miss out on any of this. Leave a like on the video as well. Thank you very much for listening to me shill for myself. It's a rough time right now for your boy, but we're trying to reach 100,000 subscribers by the end of the year. It'd be a huge milestone. I finally get one of those plaques. So if you could help me out with that, I deeply appreciate it. But thank you very, very much for watching this video. I truly, truly hope that it helps, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.